truth. And if the word come and testify when another member of the cabinet, the Attorney General, had brought the prosecution was debated. Well, they said, will you try? I said, I will try to my utmost. And I got to I went to Washington, and when I got there, why, it was Armistice Day, November 11th. And what was the year?
1937, it's Swanson is right.
November 11th, which was Armistice Day, and I found the Interior Department closed. However, I made a telephone call to AP's office and talked with his appointment secretary and asked her if it would be possible for me to see Secretary AP. I said, tell him frankly, it's about the case of Penny and Madison, court has recess, so I can come to Washington and talk things over with him. And tell him that's what I want to talk to him about. And see if he's busy this afternoon. She said, well, hold the line. And a few minutes later, she came back and told me that the secretary would be glad to see me immediately if I'd come over. I went over and spent several hours with him. And I pointed out the issues, the circumstances, and that even after the Supreme Court decision, I said, you, Mr. Secretary, issued an order as the administrator calling upon the oil industry to continue by voluntary action to do all those things which were aimed at the recovery. And I said, President Roosevelt himself issued a similar order. And I said, now for men to be prosecuted for doing what you and the President and I, as chairman of the committee, asked them to do is certainly going too far. And nobody could make a better witness in that respect than you, because you are the man that ran it. And your every order was obeyed. When we had conferences with President Roosevelt about it, and a committee from our Planning and Coordination Committee, a subcommittee, would go, and you would go and take your attorney and the counsel for the Interior Department, those conferences with Roosevelt, we ironed out everything in advance. Agree? That's going too far. Let me put it to you another way, Mr. Secretary. Suppose you and I had been indicted. And we were under trial. You and me were under trial in Madison, Wisconsin. And all these other men that we've been associated with in a friendly fashion, both majors and independents, had been asked by us to come and testify to save us from dishonor. And they had looked the other way. How would you and I feel about it? Well, he said that the difficulty is that here's two members of the President's cabinet. It might bring on disagreement in the cabinet of such far-reaching effect as to practically destroy the usefulness of the cabinet and be certainly an injury to the President. And under those conditions, he said, while I agree with you, under those conditions, I can't see how it's possible for me to testify. Now, I noticed Thompson says that he did agree to testify.
He agreed, and then,
No, he didn't agree.
well, then he said if they wanted to, he said he resigned, would testify for them.
Well, he said if he did,
He said he would resign, would testify
he
for
said he
them.
would have to resign.
Yeah.
He never did say he would resign.
Well, that's what Ed said.
I know.
He
Of course, you
questioned
can put it Ed's way if you want to, but Ed wasn't there.
point, yes.
Of course, he heard all about it.
Well, he was wanting me to ask
Ed
him.
was out at Madison too, you know.
Well, that's what he brought up. He wanted me to bring out this incident, see?
Well, now that is the incident, and when that was over, why I caught the first train for Madison, and when I got there, why, of course, had not yet reconvened, and we had a secret meeting in which the chief counsel and the chief and the men that had been invited held a session that lasted nearly all night, in which I explained to them in great detail the place in my conversation with issues. I did tell this to issues. This is an afterthought now. Isn't there some way, Mr. Secretary? I omitted to say this a while ago, but I said, isn't there some way, Mr. Secretary, that the President could use his influence to let up on this case, because it's a violation of the President's order, and certainly as the Administrator, it's a violation of your order, and if it could be softened. I said, these men have been treated as if they were criminals, and I said, if any of them are guilty, I'm just as guilty as they are, because I did everything I could to promote the recovery of the oil industry in accordance with your orders and instructions. And well, when the case was resumed, I don't know whether you ought to put this in there or not. So. I'll
I won't do anything that'll hurt anybody.
When the hearings were resumed, there was a vast difference in the attitude of the judge from what there had been prior thereto. And it finally all fizzled out, as you know. And while I didn't get Iggy to testify, my trip to Washington had the desired result. Now that may be boastful on my part, but it's the gospel truth.
Now, let's see, you helped organize the Compact Commission in 35, didn't you? You would attend that meeting in Plum City and so forth, I remember here.
Yes, I attended all those meetings.
I think there's nothing special about that they said. Is there any new angles to that?
No, there's no new angles to it.
And then we go through the coal committee hearings and so forth and that, and then we come to the war, and then you joined up the PAW up there in Chicago, I remember.
Yes, I was...
That's what Floyd wanted me to ask you particularly, what are your special problems while you're in there, because he thought maybe you had a lot of things to iron out up there in Chicago.
When the Higgies became administrator for national defense, he asked me to come to Washington, and I did. I called on him, having wired him in advance that I was complying with his request, and said, I want you to come and help me out in this new job that has been placed on me. Will you do it? I said, Mr. Secretary, I have no desire for a job. I'd rather tend to my own business for a while. But who am I to say that I won't serve my country when they're drafting your boys all the time for $21 a month, and when, as sure as the sun rises, we're going to be engaged in this war at no distant date, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, my answer is this. If you can find a job that you want me to do, that you think I'm the best at, I'll serve any place under you that you desire me to serve.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a subsequent meeting and went back again, and he wanted me to be district director, or director of district number 2 with headquarters in Chicago, and also director of production. He gave me 2 jobs. And then I want you to stay around in conference with what was the man that was his assistant? Davies. In conference with Ralph Davies and others here. I want you to help him pick out some men for the other districts. You know them all, and better than we do. And so I had something to do with, I won't say what, but I had something to do with picking a district director for district number 3. That's Texas and all that.
And what special problems do you have at Chicago?
Well, of course, our problems at Chicago,
all that stuff,
steel products were lack supply due to the necessity for the armed forces having first priority over everything, and some methods had to be adopted to get more oil with less steel. That was our biggest problem. And as time went on, various orders would come from the War Production Board. And my difficulties in my district were principally the fields and the oil fields in Indiana and Illinois, where small tracts like churchyards and cemeteries would be leased, and drill a well on 1 acre, and I recall one instance where one of those wells was 14 offsets. Well, that was a waste of material to get the oil, and so now I worked as director. I worked in cooperation with the Industry Committee. The Industry Committee on Production was chairmaned by Otto Donnell. And Otto and I have always been very good friends. And I had his confidence and he had mine. And I worked out a plan of development to save steel, which I reduced to writing, but before I reported it back to Washington, it was made because of the conditions in Illinois and some few cases outside of Illinois and Indiana. I know there were some in Kansas and Oklahoma, where casing and other steel products are being wastefully used. I worked out an order, and before sending it in, I asked Otto Donnell to pull his committee together, and I submitted it to his committee, and got their full approval on it. On to Washington then as my recommendation, and that order came out of the War Production Board as Order M62, and they made it applicable to the entire United States. I'm the author of Order M62. Although, of course, I couldn't promulgate it. I couldn't promulgate it. I could just recommend it. Now that order, these fellows, if they build those wells, we just shut them in. There was a group of in Chicago that were the chief offenders in that. They never had been in the oil industry and saw a way to make what is vulgarly termed the fast buck. And after we got that order, then they, throughout the industry, and throughout my district, if anybody in the industry wanted to drill a well that looked like it was getting close to the border, they called me and gave me the facts. And in order not to slow up the drilling of wells that were justified, I undertook to give them my ruling on it right now. And I did, but I kept a notebook on my desk day by day, putting down each and every time I authorized it and made the ruling. Well, we were holding monthly meetings in Washington of the 5 directors in the 5 states, 5 districts, and I took up there, and his name slipped me, you know who he was. He later went with the
Howard Marshall.
Howard Marshall.
Yeah.
I reported to him what I was doing, and why he said, you can't do that. You haven't had his order to do that. I said, Howard, what are we supposed to be here for? Are we supposed to be here to shut down the oil industry and let Hitler win the war? Because if you go through all the red tape that you're talking about, and prosecutions and so forth, and getting it all tangled up in the court, it'll shut down production. There won't be any more wells to drill, to speak of. Well, he said, suppose after you've told them that, and they go ahead and drill the well, then we bring a suit in the federal court against them. I said, you lose the case, Howard. He said, why? Because I said, well, God, I'll be right there to testify. And when I testify that as district director, I authorized the drilling of that well, that it was a needed well, that we needed more oil, and the only way we could get more oil was to drill wells with at least a seal. Do you think any jury is going to take your side of the case? No, I said, I didn't ask for this damn job. And if you don't like the way I'm running it, you complain to Mr. Ickes. But I said, I want a hearing with Ickes before he takes action on it. And I said, not only that, I'm going to continue to do it, regardless of what you say about it. Because I'm not going to tie up these men in the oil industry. I've already told them what they could do and what they can't do, and by golly, I'm going to stay with it. You can't change these orders every day, and I'm a good lawyer, but I said, don't forget that I'm a lawyer too.
You never had experience in our business.
No, not at that time. No. And so, of course, you don't want to put all that wrong.
Well, I want to, that's the last real official contact with the government. That's what. And then when you got through that, you came back here and got back in your business?
I resigned in 1943.
Yeah. And you've been back here.
I resigned that job and was made assistant to the Davies in my territory. The whole United States increased production. And it wasn't satisfactory. And holding that job, I had right in my office here. And I resigned in 1943 because I wasn't getting anything done.
No, can't do everything.
Now, right, this is my son George. Now, George, and I don't know your thing. Have you pull up his hair? Yeah, you sit down, George. He thought they went down in Lake Murray.
Well, he just took him down there.
Oh, you
his mother and his aunt down there, and I told him to come back and get me here. So. I don't want to wear you out here either.
No, it's all right. I just If this is Rotary Club Day, will you go to Rotary Club with me? Or do you want to go down and meet your wife down Lake Murray?
Well, I better go down there and maybe I can finish up here. What time do you have to leave here about? What time do you have to leave?
12 o'clock.
Well, it's about 20 minutes to. Maybe I can finish up here in 20 minutes here. I got a few more questions to ask. Now, according to this, it says that you're now president of Franklin, Aston and Fair Incorporated. That's correct?
That's correct.
Have you got any other companies besides that?
No, that's the only one at this time.
Is that Bert Aston?
That's Bert
Isn't he out there at Roswell or someplace?
New Mexico to be on the ground.
And who is Fair?
Just the office in my building. That's R.W. Fair of Tyler, Texas.
Tyler, Texas. I knew R.W. Fair there. I don't know in person know who he is. Now, are you still active in that company?
Oh, yes.
And where do you have your production now and stuff?
Well, it's mostly in New Mexico.
New Mexico. What county? Is it Lee County?
Oh, it's
Hobbs in that area?
No, it's in Eddy County mostly, and we're getting ready to build well up near Boulder. Deep water there.
How many wells do you have right now?
Well, we made wells, and we made a deal with a Newmont Oil Company.
Newmont?
Yeah.
N-E-W-M-O-N-T? I've heard of them.
But then there's no need to do that.
No, but I just wanted to get a little
because those wells are not under our management anymore. They're under their management, however, we've retained and we've retained all the deeper rights.
I see.
And in that very field, we've recently drilled an Abo Reef well.
I see.
Down below, and we've got all that left under all that big acreage. We made the deal with Newmont. No use going into detail.
No. But the point is this: I want to say, young today.
We have our own office building in Roswell, and we haven't got a big force like the major companies do, but we've got the best and most efficient group of men in the oil business anywhere, equal to any of them. I don't give a damn where they are.
Now, how many employees do you have around here now?
I don't have any here. I'm just semi-retired.
You're semi-retired now.
And as far as this is concerned, my whole operations now are with Franklin, Aston and Fair.
I see.
I'm not doing anything here.
What about your children? I'd like to know something about them. You have a son in Chester?
He's in the next room.
I see. I never met him, but I've heard about him.
Chester? Can you come in a minute? I want you to meet Mr. Dahlgren. My son George.
I never did meet any of your family, so I just wanted to know something about him.
I'm glad to see you.
Is he carrying on the business now?
Well, everyone's fine away. And I'm going while he's in charge.
Well, what companies do you operate for?
I just working on this person.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day with City Service Gas Company. They made a deal with you to rent part of the space in that building up there when they first moved to Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
So that was before you sold that. It's now called the Burge Apartment.
That's right. Yeah, I sold it.
They converted it during the war. They discovered it and wanted they converted it over, to get rooms down in town that close for.
Didn't want to do it, but
I was watching at the time.
I was working to win the war, and I'd help win the war, so anything they asked, I did it. I didn't give it to them, but I mean I complied.
Well, Ed Swanson mentioned your daughter here is quite a bit.
I had to leave. Where's she now?
Well, excuse me.
Go ahead, then.
Get back to work.
Yeah, all right.
She's her husband died about 4 years ago, leaving one daughter, and they lived in Grand Rapids. He was working today.
What is his name?
His name was Donald M. Stagaman, S-T-A-G-I-G-M-A. Louise is now married, and a man by the name of Arthur Mister. and my daughter's 18 years old now and going to school in Switzerland.
I see.
Girls' school in Switzerland.
And where does she live now? Where do they live?
They're in Palma de Mallorca for the winter, and so Louise, daughter, Virginia, could go down and visit, and maybe she gets off from school and in the winter over there.
I see.
And come back, I don't know whether I'll go back to Grand Rapids or not, but she's the one that's the head conference refers to her. I took her to Madison with me because
I see.
I recently lost my wife, her mother.
Yeah.
So I've been married to
See, your wife died in 37.
37, May 1st. I'm married again, and I had our 20th wedding anniversary, and my present wife.
Yes, sir. Well, you see, you had two sets of children. See, your first wife, Priscilla, what happened to Priscilla?
Priscilla was married and lived at Steelville, Missouri.
What is her name? What is her married name?
Bass.
B-A-S-S?
Yeah. Priscilla, her husband is William Bass. And they run a department store in a small town in Steelville, and I'm just now putting in the men's store.
I see. Let's see,
That's the...
how many did first wife you had?
That
One,
was that's the
Chester, and
when I married them, and my wife was a widow and had a daughter Louise, that's Louise, and also a niece, Jewel, and I adopted those girls after I married Virginia.
I see.
And then we also adopted another girl.
How many grandchildren?
Those children down in my
St. Porter carries a little notebook with all their names and birthdays.
But I can give you the number of Priscilla has 4, 2 boys and 2 girls. And Louise has 1. Virginia has 5. Betty has 4. 2 boys and 2 girls. That's 9. Chester had 2 daughters, but one got killed in an automobile accident. And she lives in Fort Worth and has 2 children of her own. Well, 2 children of hers were my great-grandchildren. I had, that's 9 living grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren.
No, I'll mention, I will mention that.
Put all that in detail.
No, but I was just wanting to get, I'll have too much material and then I'll have to decide how to use it. Now you might be interested in knowing that there's a good possibility the IPA might be on you later on this year. So I just thought I'd mention that to you also. That last paragraph there. Wow. Have you ever had any production in Louisiana?
I lived in there for a long time during the 4 years that I conducted the fight before Congress. It is that I led the fight. I don't claim credit for all of it. I claim credit for the drive. A lot of them are ready to quit. I wouldn't quit.
Well, there's a lot of folks who work with you.
And yes, they're from every oil state, and they were loyal.
Yeah.
And whenever I got on the telephone and told them I was having trouble with their delegation. As long as come up here without stressing them out, they can't. I would work all day in the office or in the Capitol, and then I sit up most of the night making telephone calls.
Yeah. Well, I think I've covered most everything now. Of course, you ran for senator back in '32. It says that you got 1,000 more votes than Hoover did in Oklahoma. Of course, that was a landslide then.
And there's an interesting story in connection with that.
Here, and also that you belong to all Masonic bodies, including Scottish and York Rites, and you're a charter member and former president of the Ardmore Lions Club, former president of the Dornick Hills Country Club. Are you doing anything in civic activities now?
Well, I'm now a member of the Rotary Club. After 1943, when I came back from Chicago, I joined the Rotary Club.
Thank you.
I've been a Rotarian ever since, and going to nothing today. But the thing that I said was a story about what were we talking about this thing now?
What are your hobbies? That's another question. What do you do for relaxation?
Fishing is my principal hobby. I used to play golf, but I haven't played anymore.
Where do you fish? At Lake Murray or other places?
Well, I fish in the lakes around here.
The private lakes and
The
things?
Rod and Gun Club, and I've got several lakes from all on my ranch in North Town. I joined the big ranch.
Yeah. How big a ranch do you have in North Town?
Oh, and it's about 1,100 acres. Some of it was down to about 1,100 acres. I sold off some of it. It's still houses all over.
I see that.
There was something in there. There was quite interesting.
Something about the elections? This is
You
run for senator?
Yeah. You want to know about that?
Yeah.
Well, during this fight for the tax on oil, I won the support of President Hoover. Although Andrew Mellon, the principal owner, was one of the biggest importers. And I had access to him whenever it was needed, to the president. I didn't abuse the privilege, but he was a very material help. And to wind up in getting the votes, the Republican votes, I had gotten the Democratic support, almost fully, and getting the Republican votes from the New England states. We wanted to buy this cheap fuel as much as possible, and there was no tax on it. And I learned, I had quite a number of assistants in Washington that attended all meetings and functions whereby information might be obtained, and I had a number of senators and a number of members of the House who were keeping me well informed as to what was going on in Congress. And the day before it was to be voted on in the Senate, after having passed the House, and the Senate Finance Committee having approved it, that the group had entered into an agreement to scuttle the tax on imported oil. At that stage of the game, I called Pat Hurley and told him about it. He said, well, Wirt, that's impossible. I said, Pat, I have a man that gave me the information to send to the meeting where the action took place. But I said, I'd like you to check on it. You can call these men up and find out some of them. I had this long I said, if you call, and I'll sit right here by my telephone. And he called back and said, it is true. I'm living north now. Well, I said, I'm going to ask again, then to get me an appointment this afternoon, if possible, with the president. Won't wait till tomorrow because it's going to be voted on tomorrow. He did so. It's tickling in my throat as well. Well, to make it short, I called the president. I gave him the names of the senators who had attended the meeting and proposed to settle me. So I said, Mr. President, I've worked 4 years for this, and I can't afford to lose. But I said, if I do, you know, it will be incumbent upon me then to have a press release, give a press release down at the press club last night. Because when I fight with my daughter's office. You know that before. The fact is, I may be presuming too much. He kicked Andrew Mellon upstairs. Made an ambassador to Great Britain because I had made a speech at Pittsburgh in which I outlined Mellon's position on this thing. I was invited to make that speech, and I made it without holding back anything. Again, it's because the newspapers up and down the Atlantic seaboard that began to headline some of them points for that's another story. Well, now the result of it is that President Hoover said, Mr. Franklin, I sympathize with you greatly. I've come to believe in your cause as much as you do yourself. I'll do everything I can. But it's busted up. The struggle. And they all voted for it instead of against it. Oh man. Did he get you to run for president? Well, of course, I was quite popular down here. In Oklahoma because of having led that fight and won it, which meant so much to the state. And they had been attempting to get me to run for governor, which I refused. And they had wired me in Washington that wanted to run for senator, and I refused. One night I got into my Oklahoma City residence and that's it. There's a wonderful Oklahoma City on the North Smith. And I hadn't been home for a minute, one of the leading politicians of the state from out there. Fred Coogan? Fred Coogan, yeah. Called me on the stage, I only phoned him. Work. There's a big group of your friends meeting down here in the Curtin Hotel and Paula so-and-so. And I said, you got my answer to that long ago. Well, he said, can't you come down here? I said, I haven't been in the house 10 minutes. And brought that, well, he said you wouldn't want to alienate all your friends down here. I said, well, of course not. I think of them very highly. Well, you better come down. I said, I'll be right down. I've been eating this time, eating it down. Well, about 1 minute to 12. As it was, I started in working on them. About 11 o'clock, I kept running them down. work. You haven't got your bill for the Senate yet, have you? I said, no, I haven't. Well, he said, the president sent me down here to get you to run for senator. It'll help the ticket. And don't you think he can help you in these other things? I said, well, he has already helped me, Pat. And I said, if you put it on that ground, I'll just say this thing. If you will ask the president in one of his nationwide speeches that's broadcast to endorse the plank in the Republican platform, which I put in there as a delegate and a member of the Resolutions Committee, and you were present and saw the fight. And if you'll get me these votes in the Senate that I need, I'll run for senator and measure campaign. And I'll file in the morning. I think so. That's the way I have in the morning. Well, our Democratic friends from
This is Penn Woods. I'm interviewing for the Oklahoma Living Legends Library. I'm with Justice and Mrs. Floyd Jackson. Justice Jackson has served in served as a judge in Comanche County, and he has served as Justice on the Supreme Court and as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Justice Jackson, we will talk first. Why don't you tell us a little about your early background, your family, where you were born, and when you came to Oklahoma?
I was born in Wise County, Texas, near Alvord. We moved 2 or 3 places in Texas and finally arrived in Oklahoma in 1914, at which time I was 12 years old. I attended school, country school, later attending high school in Devon, and later attending University of Oklahoma, and took my law degree in 1927.
Why don't you tell us a little about southern Oklahoma, what it was like at the time that you came in 1914?
Well, the state was 7 years old at that time, and you could still see a little blue stem along the highways in Cotton County. There was at least one family on every farm in that area, and I recall during the early years in Cotton County that the rural schoolhouse and the union religious services conducted on Sunday. One time we had a picture made, and there were 268 people at that meeting. Those people were early pioneers in Oklahoma. I would say maybe not all too religious, but certainly all with character and determination. A substantial, courageous people.
Could you tell us a little about the University of Oklahoma?
When I arrived there in 1922, I think we had 3,200 students at OU. And at that time, it was possible for a student to know nearly everybody on the campus. Certainly we knew those who were important on the campus in campus politics and the beauty queens and the debaters, the football players, the basketball, and otherwise. We were well acquainted with those who stood out, were outstanding students, as well as outstanding and entertainers in the arts.
What would you say were the high points or the most interesting points in your career as a lawyer after you graduated from the university?
Well, it was rather varied. I don't know that there were any outstanding points. During the last 5 years of my practice before the war, I discovered during that period, I discovered before that time that if you're going to be a lawyer, you have to forget yourself and remember but don't go to the courthouse unless you think you can win. And when you practice law on that basis, being honest with yourself, with your client, and with the court, with the jury, then you become an effective lawyer.
Could you think offhand of any particular cases that you feel might be remembered in the state that you were either counsel for or that you were involved in?
I doubt if there are any that anyone would remember. I did on one occasion appear for the Cotton Electric Cooperative in the District Court in Oklahoma City in a private practice law shortly before I got into the Army. And several other cooperatives in the state employed me along with Cotton Electric Cooperative. And this case involved whether the cooperatives would pay sales tax on the thing they sold, that is electricity. And that case was tried. We won it. And it was later appealed to the Supreme Court, but finally dismissed. Not a great case, I don't mean that at all, but certainly a tremendous impact for the state of Oklahoma. Otherwise, I don't recall any particularly outstanding cases of any particular importance. Just the routine probate, quiet titles, damage suits, and otherwise.
During the period down there, what would you say were the outstanding events in your area that you either attended or participated in or saw? Can you think of any particularly interesting events?
I don't at the moment recall any particular events. I can say this, that in a moment ago about these early pioneers in Oklahoma. There were still some of them in Cotton County when I became a lawyer, and their sons and daughters were still there. And the thing that I would say about the rural area in Oklahoma, and I think it's still true, that the finest Americans you'll find anywhere, the most loyal. There are exceptions, of course, but as a whole, certainly you'll find great Americans in that rural area, which includes all of Cotton County and Comanche County.
You were involved in the military during World War II. Were you a reserve officer prior to that? Were you a reserve officer prior to World War II?
I had been a reserve officer, but I decided before the war broke out that maybe I was a little too old to be a soldier, and I dropped my commission. And after the war started, well, I was drafted into the service. Later, my commission was restored, and I served in South Dakota, in South Texas, Los Angeles, finally in Antwerp, and later in Salzburg, Austria, in claims service. My European service was in claims. Prior to that time, I was in the anti-aircraft.
Did you participate in reserve activity during the period before your commission was over at Fort Sill? If so, I wonder if you would describe Fort Sill as it was before World War II as a reservist.
As I said a moment ago, I let my commission drop, but prior to that time, I was serving in the reserve and active duty in the reserve. And I do recall Fort Sill prior to the Second World War. During the Depression period, a lot of construction was going on there, like officers' quarters, that is for the families of officers, and many of the substantial buildings were constructed prior to the Second World War in Fort Sill, including some of the battalion or housing for battalions. And if you're there now, you would notice in the older part of Fort Sill, 3 large buildings capable of holding or accommodating a regiment. I was in those buildings before the Second World War, and they had whatever an enlisted man would require or need for his comfort and entertainment in those buildings prior to the Second World War.
Could you describe the training as you all participated and also as you observed prior to World War II during that early period?
I would say it was very good. During that period, the Second World War, prior to the Second World War, I was an infantryman. And I recall on one occasion going up there and spending a week out in the mountains there on solving problems, military problems, at which time they put me on one of those old artillery horses. And even though I grew up in the country, the artillery horse was greater than I was. And it was quite an experience that I had with this artillery horse trying to take my platoon into action.
I understand that you ran for judge the first time on that your race started while you were still overseas, and that you were fairly near the end of your race when you got back. I'll get Ms. Jackson's version of this later, but I want to get your version as you observed your race for judge.
When I was in Austria, an attorney in Walters wrote me, Walter Hubble, and said I could be elected district judge if I wanted to be, because Toby Morris was running for Congress. And I wrote Geneva about it and told her if she was interested, we might throw my hat in the ring, and she threw it in. And the campaigning was practically all done before I got home. And the election was 3 weeks after I arrived. The first week, I was meeting friends that she had made. The second week, I was writing some newspaper articles bragging upon myself because none had been written before I returned home. The third week, I was making speeches. But notwithstanding my efforts, there were, I'm satisfied, numerous people that thought I would have received more votes if I'd have just stayed in Europe until after the election was over. Some told me so.
I think we'll interject here, and I'd like to talk with Ms. Jackson about the election. Could you tell it from your standpoint?
Well, there was something he forgot. When he was in Austria, he failed to organize. I think I said that. He failed to tell you that he organized the claims, and he was situated in Salzburg, Austria. He had sub-offices in Vienna and Linz, Gemünden, and up in the Alps, the Zellem Sea. So he was quite a man over there, I think. And it was a beautiful country, and nevertheless, he was so homesick that he didn't let me come. I wanted to, but he said he'd go back. And what was it you asked me?
Tell about the election.
All right. Well, I got tired living, alone in a small town. And when the judge suggested that he be nominated for district judge, why, I agreed if Floyd gave me permission, and he was utterly indifferent, so the judge and I together got busy. And so I thing about politics. And the first person I approached, I had been told to go to this banker, and so I was so confused and rattled that I said I had to wait a long time until he interviewed a number of people. When he reached me, I had become so frightened that I said he wanted to know what he could do for me, and I said, well, I'm Mrs. Walters from Jackson. And then I said, no, I mean I'm Mrs. Jackson from Walters. And that was my start. That shows how experienced I was in such things. And I saw him 3 months later, and he said, Mrs. Jackson, you've improved greatly. I had good advisors, and I really worked. I think I walked hundreds of miles. And because I didn't know what to do, I overdid it. But I enjoyed it thoroughly, and because nobody knew him, nobody knew me, upset. It was rather hard because his opponent was a native who was named for the town, Lawton Burton. And so I had a lot of funny experiences in learning to campaign. But I guess it came out fine, and finally I began more and more to get people won over on my side. I called it my side, but they were very eager to meet him, and as you know, at first he was sort of yet acclimated, and he didn't talk at all. I'd introduce him, and nothing came out. He'd just say hello, and and they wondered if he was as good as I had said he was. And so he had to prove himself, but he got busy, and I guess the result is shown now. He made it good.
He hadn't had that political experience you had had. Judge Jackson, I wonder if you could tell us a little about what you feel interesting cases that came before you while you were the district judge.
Offhand, I don't recall any particular case. They were all interesting to me. It didn't make much difference. Judging is judging, whether you're trying a big case or a small one. And at the moment, I don't recall any particular case that was particularly interesting or particularly important, because actually all of them were important, certainly to the litigants.
Why don't you tell us the campaign for the Supreme Court, and then we'll go into your experience in the Supreme Court.
Well, the campaign for the Supreme Court was just another race I'd had won before. Fortunately, in my career in public service, I have made 2 races, one for the district judge and one for the Supreme Court, and re-elected after that without any opponent. This race for the Supreme Court covered 9 counties, and I can say to you that people respect district judges. And I had one man say that he did respect district judges from another county. And he was voting for me because of his knowledge and acquaintance with some former district judges in other counties. So that was a pleasant race. We didn't campaign intensively. We did campaign across the 9 counties. And Geneva worked with me, and I can say this, in those counties where I worked, I lost 2. In those counties where she worked, we lost.
Judge Jackson, I wonder if you could tell us a little about, I know that there have been some historic cases in the Supreme Court since you've been there. I wonder if you could tell us what you feel were the most historic cases that you've been involved in the Supreme Court.
Actually, I'm not able to answer that question. There have been a lot of difficult cases that have arisen and have come to the Supreme Court. In fact, I've